Please stand. There are 2 times in our Christian calendar in a year that we hear of the death of Jesus, and this on a Palm Sunday is one of those times. As our reading is the shorter of the longer version, if at any time you need to be seated, please feel free to do so. My brothers and sisters, this is the passion of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew. Jesus stood before the governor Pontius Pilate, who questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." And when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they are testifying against you?" But he did not answer him one word, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now on the occasion of the feast, the governor was accustomed to release to the crowd one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had assembled, Pilate said to them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus called the Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had handed him over. While he was still seated on the bench, his wife sent him a message, "Have nothing to do with this righteous man. I suffered much in a dream today because of him." The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas, but to destroy Jesus. The governor said to them in reply, "Which of the 2 do you want me to release to you?" They answered, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus called Christ?" And they all said, "Let him be crucified." But he said, "Why? What possible evil has he done?" They only shouted the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was not succeeding at all, but that a riot was about to break out instead, he took water. He washed his hands in the sight of all in the crowd, and he declared, I am innocent of this man's blood. Look to it yourselves." And the whole people said in reply, "His blood be upon us and upon our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but after he had Jesus scourged, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped off his clothes and threw a scarlet military cloak about him. They wove a crown of thorns, and they placed it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand. Kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, hail you, King of the Jews!" They spat upon him and took the reed and kept striking him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the cloak, dressed him again in his own clothes, and they led him off to be crucified. As they were going out, they met a Syrian named Simon. This man they pressed into service to carry the cross. And when they came to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they gave Jesus wine mixed with gall. But when he had tasted it, he refused to drink. After they had crucified him, they divided his garments by casting lots, and they sat down and they kept watch over him. They placed over his head the written charge against him, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and the other upon his left. Those passing by reviled him, shaking their heads and saying, "You would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days? How about saving yourself if you are the Son of God, and come down now from that cross?" Likewise, the chief priests and the scribes and elders mocked him and said, "He saved others. Yet it appears as though he cannot save himself. So this is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and all of us here will believe in him. He trusted in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. The revolutionaries who were crucified with him also kept abusing him in the same way. From noon onward, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out in a very loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders who heard it said, this one is calling for Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran to get a sponge, soaked it in wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the rest said, wait, let's see if Elijah comes to save him. Jesus cried out again in a loud voice and gave up the spirit. Behold, the veil of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, rocks split, tombs were opened, and the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Coming forth from their tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. The centurion and the man with him who were keeping watch over Jesus feared greatly after they had experienced the earthquake. The one said to the other, truly, this was the Son of God. The gospel of Christ. Praise be to you, O Christ. Please be seated. I went to Sacred Heart Grammar School in South Amboy, and it was a very large school, and it also was a terribly large church, huge. And it was in a very Gothic style. It was really quite beautiful on the inside. And in 8th grade, typically what happened was they selected the week prior to Palm Sunday, all the good kids to go over and start stripping the palm. See, the palm that you have here that has already been pre-stripped, this actually comes in a bundle and has to be torn apart. And it would take about 3 days. And I know this is going to shock all of you, but I was selected as a good kid. And so for 3 days, I didn't go to class, and I, myself, and one other male student, and about 6 or 8 girls, because the guys, we weren't all so good, all were over there for all day stripping palm. And when I tell you they brought us into the basement, this actually might double as child labor, but I think the time extension for going back and filing a suit against them has probably passed. You would walk in and there would be cases of palm 10, 12 foot high by 6 or 7, and it was endless. By the time I finished on Friday, because we start on a Wednesday, we finish on Friday, my hands had so many paper cuts, from palm cuts, from the palms, and we would just tear that out. And I remember the priest coming down and talking to us, about what it is that we're doing and why it is so important and how symbolic this is. You see, all over the Christian world today, they're celebrating this as the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. I'm going to share with you a different vision, a different experience of this based on history. Now, the Roman Empire is enormous, and it covers probably most of the known world at that time. Rome occupied Jerusalem, and during Passover, all the Jewish males were required to go to the temple. Indeed, the sacrifices of the lambs could only be done in the temple, which of course was inside Jerusalem. So the way that this works, and for those of us who had been there and seen this, all of Jerusalem would be jammed and packed with people huge lines waiting to get into the temple to sacrifice their lamb. And along the landscape, all outside of the city walls of Jerusalem, all in these fields all the way around. And if you remember, Jesus, after having dinner with his disciples at what we consider the Last Supper, goes out to the Mount of Olives. This was really very common for people to stay outside the walls of Jerusalem because it was actually cooler to stay outside the walls because it was so hot inside Jerusalem because of all the people. So you're talking about a city, and around this city there would be thousands upon thousands of people. Now, the gates of Jerusalem, there were 5 main entrances. At the very same time of this story of Jesus entering Jerusalem, the Romans, most likely at the very exact time that Jesus chose to enter, on the east side of Jerusalem, Pilate, on top of the grandest horse you would ever have seen, led by thousands of soldiers, made a huge parade into Jerusalem as a show and a sign of force. It was Pilate's way of letting everyone know, if you get out of hand, if you think you're going to rise up, because at this point, the Jews outnumbered the Romans inside the walls of Jerusalem. If you think anything is going to come of this week, because you're all here and you're waiting upon a Messiah, trust me, this force that you see before me, will be unleashed upon each and every one of you. It was a sure, clear sign of dominance, of force, of power, of strong political position. All of that was being done on the west side of Jerusalem. Jesus enters on the east. And Jesus entering is not on a grand white horse. He's on a donkey. And the people who are in front and surrounding him don't have swords or spears. They're not in garbs of protection. They're simply walking along, waving palms in the air, declaring that this is the Christ, the Messiah. I know we talk about it as a triumphal entry, but the fact of the matter is, Jesus is calling for a revolution on Palm Sunday. Notice the exact opposites that are taking place. Pilate, with all the worldly force and power and strength and all the things that people feared and actually paid attention to and followed the laws because of fear of what would happen to them. And on the other side, you have this humble man sitting upon a donkey, entering into Jerusalem. Pilate is saying, if anyone gets out of hand, if you act up in any way, you will be crushed. And Jesus is calling for a revolution of love, peace, and acceptance. You need to know that this is one of the reasons why Jesus is put to death. Because I assure you, as Jesus is entering Jerusalem, word is gotten to Pilate that this Jesus is on the other side, entering the walls the same time you are, Pilate, and his is a peaceful proclamation, and the people are calling him king. You cannot take Jesus and this gospel story out of history and think that there's no ramifications to what is happening here. I simply want us to focus on the fact that Jesus knows very well what he is doing. There is also from the prophet Zechariah a declaration that your king comes into your city riding upon a colt. So remember, as Christians, this Jesus is a fulfillment of prophecy. It is how God has spoken for generation after generation, thousands of years, declaring that God has a plan. And that this plan will be fulfilled, and these are the signs upon which you are to look. And Zechariah declares that the king will enter riding upon a colt. which even when Zechariah is writing this, doesn't make any sense because all kings rode horses. Why would you ride a donkey? Jesus, by selecting the colt, by riding into the city, clearly is making a declaration that the revolution now has come. Love versus hate. That dynamic has not changed at all. Love versus hate. It still exists today. Jesus declares and wants his followers to be people of love. He is not telling them to rise up. He is not telling them to get weapons. He is not telling them to organize themselves. He is simply coming in, and as the story goes on, Jesus enters the temple, and upon entering the temple is when Jesus overturns the tables in the temple of the money changers, and that is the second reason why they want Jesus dead. One, he has to come in as a king into the city, and two, he has just disrupted the economics and the economic structure of their world. Those two reasons are enough for Jesus to get a lot of people very perturbed and very put off. Matthew makes it clear that at Jesus' trial, people are crying out for him to be crucified. I can't help but consider and think, how many of those people were waving palm branches upon his entry into Jerusalem? How many of those people lined up? See, the problem with Jesus is that he's not doing anything the way they want him to do it. Jesus says many times, my kingdom is not of this world. And what is most important in this world is love of God and love of neighbor. And that's his press point. That's all he's asking people to do. And no matter how difficult things are in this world, no matter how challenging they all get, this is not the final end. And you know how we know that? This world threw everything it had at Jesus. Hatred, evil in its deepest, darkest sense, rose up against an innocent man who had done nothing wrong, an innocent man who has not done anything but point people and redirect them to the truth and challenge them to love. A man who spoke like this, never carried a weapon, never lifted a sword. Evil threw everything it had at him, and in this world's perspective, won. Because evil killed him upon a cross. But we all know that that's not how the story ends. Because in this world, that human body that was destroyed, so evil thought, rose from the dead. Physically rose from the dead. And that is the profession of our faith. This world can throw every aspect of evil it wants against us. But we are still commanded, even in the face of that, to love instead. That our response to all hatred and evil, say it again, our response as followers of Jesus, following what the Master has asked us to do, our response to every aspect of evil that is thrown at us is to be love. Is to be love. Palm Sunday is one of the most popular church days in the Christian world. When I was a friar, we used to say it was because it was the only time the church ever gave anything away, and it was palm. And so people would show up because they're getting palm. And I don't get it. You could go to your backyard and pick some weeds and knock yourself out. But whatever the case is, somehow this day, everyone rushes in. The problem is then we don't do anything the rest of this week. We don't show up on Holy Thursday when a special meal is established by Jesus for his believers. And as I said last week, whatever terminology you use theologically to describe what this becomes, clearly Jesus has says, this is my body, this is my blood, do this in memory of me. This is the beginning of the unfolding of how God saves the world. This meal and then the cross. Very few people show up for Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday, whatever name we give it. Very few people show up for that. And I'm not sure we understand as Christians that I don't know how we celebrate Good Friday without celebrating that supper, because that supper points to the cross. This is my body which will be broken for you. This is my blood which will be poured out for you. What is he pointing to? What happens the next day? And yet we show up on Friday, and rightfully so, because of the power and the image and the salvation won for us by the crucifixion and the death. But it's Thursday, Friday, and then Easter Sunday. It is a group. Look, this is not a pitch to go to church on Thursday. It's not. I do think it's important to consider on that Thursday exactly what has taken place and what has been established. Because I don't know how you go to Good Friday and then you celebrate Easter Sunday. It's all together. One points to the other, which points to the other. The concern I have is that I'm afraid that we skip over Thursday and Friday and we just wait for Easter Sunday, which is sort of our way of coming and celebrating Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. But at the same time, are we denying who this Jesus is during these other sacred days? And also, the other point is, I think especially on Good Friday, Jesus shows us exactly how we are meant to respond to evil, especially evil that is being perpetrated upon us. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. That was his weapon of war. That was his battle cry. And yet, fundamentally, that's exactly what we're called to be as Christians. And somehow, we celebrate this triumphal entry, we celebrate his resurrection from the tomb, but we forget that there are lessons that have been poured out for us in these other days. And I'm wondering today, if Jesus was brought before a crowd, would we be willing to stand against the opposition and cry out for him to be released? It's an enormous risk. Jesus was calling upon his disciples and the people to respond to an enormous risk, to stand up and to face evil with love. And for 2,000 years, I'm not really sure we have done that so well. For 2,000 years, I'm not sure we've always accepted the challenge and have chosen to respond as Jesus would want us to respond. And so today in our world, you see, we connect Jesus now to the powerful. We connect Jesus now to those who are wealthy. We connect Jesus to those who put down the immigrants, the poor. We connect Jesus to people who don't care about our elderly or our aged. And I'm sorry, I don't know where we get that from or how we allow the true message of the love of Jesus to be usurped for political purposes. It just doesn't make any sense to me how we could sit back and allow that to happen and say that this is absolutely right and true and correct. What is it about our human nature that has such a problem with the strength and the power that is found in the absolute weakness and brokenness of this Jesus? Because we have a hard time handling that in our own heads, because we don't want to be that type of a victim, we're dismissing that image, that version, that truth about who Jesus is and who we are meant to be as his followers. And we dismiss it and we go after something we're much more comfortable with. Oh, please, let there be a Christianity that controls everything, that has all this power, all this strength, that holds dominion over everyone, that everyone has to follow exactly. Where do we get all that from? Where does that come from? How dare we take the reality of how God has come to this earth, has walked this planet, has spoken words, and acted very specifically as a witness, as an example to us, and abuse it for our own political means? It's just not appropriate. It's just not appropriate. And this Holy Week, we're not going to be able to get away from the fact that this Jesus, our Lord and Savior, is spat upon. That word in reading the gospel today just really hit me. Spat upon. The Son of the ever-living God, the Son of the Creator, allows himself to be minimized to that degree. What is the example meant for us? Again, let evil do what it may. Respond to it ultimately with love. And at the end of this journey of Holy Week, there is the power and the glory of the resurrection that is promised to each and every one of us. Each and every one of us. God bless you.